In today's video, we're looking at the latest trade rumors around the league. We're going to take a look at the New York Islanders. Since they were not able to successfully trade for DeBrincat, are they going to turn their attention possibly to another division rival? Could they offer a similar package? And then we're going to turn our attention to William Nylander. We're going to take a look at a possible trade involving the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes that was discussed in the ALS with the Hockey News to see what everybody else thinks. And we also have some updates on the Alex Galchenyuk termination. A lot more information has come out since we recorded the video earlier today. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here, Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some interesting news and some trade rumors to take a look at. First, I want to address the Alex Galchenyuk situation that we talked about in the video earlier today. Of course, at that point in time, the news was a little bit more fresh. And since that news has first come out, we have a little bit more details that have emerged. Of course, earlier this afternoon, we learned that the Arizona Coyotes were placing Alex Galchenyuk on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination, which was quite surprising considering they'd only signed him as an unrestricted free agent not only 12 days ago. I mean, what could happen in 12 days that would change your mind on terminating a player like that? Then to terminate the contract, you have to have some pretty reasonable grounds to do so. Otherwise, they're gonna, end up grieving it, and you could end up in an ugly legal battle. So you don't want to do that. We did learn though that before putting the player through waivers for contract termination, that the Coyotes did let the NHL know and what happened and what they were doing, and consulted with all their options. So they certainly felt confident this was the right way to proceed. Athletic investigative journalist Katie Strang has put out details indicating that on July the 9th, Galchenyuk apparently was arrested by police in Scottsdale, Arizona, on a number of charges, including private property hit and run, disorderly conduct, failure to obey, resisting arrest, threatening, and intimidating. So, obviously, that's a variety of things that does not look good for Mr. Galchenyuk. Obviously, I think that's certainly likely going to stick when it comes to the contract termination. The NHLPA is looking into it. At this point, it seems unlikely that they're going to file the grievance unless there's any other information here that we don't know, but it's difficult to say what could change the scenario here. I do know that there's been all kinds of speculation. I've heard lots of stories and rumors about Galchenyuk over the years, dating back to even his time in Montreal. It seems like, off the ice, he's had a history of, some not so great behavior at times. I mean, this is the first time that I've heard of him actually running into legal issues with the law and getting arrested or anything of that nature. But there's been lots of speculation, and I've never really talked about it openly on the channel or anything, because it's really nothing that I've been able to confirm. And it's really not that relevant to most of those things we talk about day to day. But I've heard lots of things about him off the ice and what he's gotten up to. So, maybe some of that was true. It does make you wonder if that's having an impact on his on-ice play. I mean, his career has spiraled downhill. I mean, he had a very, solid showing leading up to his draft year. Was a top prospect. I think he hit 30 goals once, and then it just really went downhill from there. So clearly, I just hope that whatever he's dealing with, if there is any other issues, that he gets his life and hopefully his career on track. I would think his career's on very thin ice. If there's anything left, he's bounced around a lot as it is. The on-ice play hasn't been great. It's not like he has, a lot of other reasons to kind of give teams to want to give him another opportunity. So is this the end of him in the NHL? It's difficult to say, but it could be. You never know. I just hope if he needs help and gets help, that he can hopefully get his life on track and in order here. I hate to see anybody going through that, but you don't know all the reasons on what led to this. But that is the news story about what happened with Galchenyuk. At least it makes a lot more sense now that in the last 12 days as to why they suddenly changed their mind on signing this contract. Now, as I mentioned in some trade talk I want to take a look at, we know the New York Islanders were one of the teams that were linked quite lengthy to it for quite a stretch there to Alex DeBrincat during his time in Ottawa, once it became clear that he was going to be traded, which was pretty much shortly after the Senators' season was over. When the regular season ended and they did their exit meetings, the news was pretty much out shortly thereafter based on DeBrincat's exit meeting with management, his exit meeting with the media. you could kind of tell that he probably didn't really want to be there. And I don't think it's anything personal. It's just he wanted to go home. And at the end of the day, that's what led him going to Detroit. And he ended up having to take less money than he wanted, which is probably more fair on the market value and all that. And you could debate what happened all day long. But there's no doubt there were other teams in the mix. We did also learn that there was as many as about 9 teams that he listed to the Senators in the beginning of the process that he would consider going to. At the end, no, it was really only Detroit that he would sign any kind of a longer-term deal with. But the Islanders were heavily linked, and there was rumor that they were offering a package of Jean-Gabriel Pageau, Oliver Wahlstrom, and a first-round pick for DeBrincat. I see Lou Lamoriello get a lot of, I see a lot of comments about him saying that he failed and it's all his fault that the Islanders didn't land him, and I totally disagree. I mean, this is not on Lou. Obviously, DeBrincat wanted to go to Detroit. He wanted to go home, and that's the only team he would sign with. So I really don't think at the end of the day that it wouldn't matter who the manager was on the other side. I think Lou probably did what he could, and it just didn't work out. Now, is it his fault that the team hasn't done other trades and that they're, basically the same team as before? Yeah, okay, that to some degree. I'm not completely letting him off the hook here. He has work to do. He should be trying to make some more changes to this team to make them more competitive. I mean, they have they have one of the top goalies in the league. They have a good blue line. I mean, it could be better, but it's pretty good. But they need more scoring. There's no doubt this team cannot score enough big goals, and that's one of the main areas they need to focus on. If they can bring in another top 6 high-scoring forward, that would be what they need. Not easy to do, mind you, but that's what's been being worked on. Now, they've been linked to some other players too, and it hasn't worked out. But I've seen some reports today saying now that the DeBrincat trade is done, that didn't work out, where should they turn their attention to next? And could they use a similar type of package to get another top 6 forward? And could it be division rival Travis Konecny? I mean, Konecny at this point, I think, could be lured to Philadelphia, but word is that when the season first ended back in April, the Flyers made it known that there was a variety of players that were available. There was not many players that were at all that were considered untouchable. Not too long after, they traded Provorov, they traded Kevin Hayes. We know that there's other players that have been out there, like Lawton, Konecny to some degree. Hart's name has been out there. A few others. Sanheim was really close to being traded as well. Didn't work out. But at this point, the latest on Konecny is that the Flyers might not bother moving, at least not right now. Now, when things get into the season, closer to the deadline, maybe that changes their mind. Hard to say. And would that same kind of package work for Konecny? Ottawa rejected the trade for DeBrincat, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a terrible return. At the end of the day, look at what they got from Detroit. They got Dominic Kubalik, they got a prospect defenseman, and they got a protected first-round pick and a fourth-round pick. So really, this one has a first-round pick. You got Wahlstrom was in the Sabrango. Wahlstrom was a better, he's not really still a prospect. He's further along in his development and more experience than Donovan Sabrango. So to me, that's a better quality player, at least for today. Maybe not down the road. We'll never know. Then you got Pageau as, compared to Kubalik. Pageau's more of a center, plays a little bit different. But really, at the end of the day, you could argue that the Islanders had just as good a package, if not better, to Ottawa than Detroit did. But DeBrincat wanted Detroit, and that's the driving factor here. So, he wouldn't necessarily sign with anybody else. So could they get Konecny for that kind of package? I honestly do think the Flyers would consider that. I don't know for sure that they would take it, of course, because I know they had some pretty high valuations on some of their guys, and they do that on purpose. It's not so much that they think this player absolutely is worth that. They just think that that's what they need to get to pull the trigger, because they got to remember, they like the player too. They see how that player can help their team and how they could play a role and be good for them. So at the end of the day, they're not going to move them just for the sake of moving them. They need to almost get overpayment that they can't refuse. And I don't know that they would do an in-division trade with the Islanders for this package. Except it's a good package. I don't know that it's good enough to really move them into, making sure that they have to do that trade. But it is the kind of player that they need. And I certainly don't, I would not blame Lou for looking into it and talking to the Flyers. But we'll see where they turn their attention to next. I hope that he continues to look for that kind of player, because that is the kind of player that they could use. Now, I also want to talk about William Nylander and possible trade with the Carolina Hurricanes. So we've talked about the fact that William Nylander and the Leafs have been far apart on contract negotiations. He and Austin Matthews are both entering the final of their contracts. They both have, a year to go. Obviously, Matthews has the no-move clause, so we know that they can't trade Matthews. Not that they want to anyways. They would only really trade Matthews if he came to them and said, move me, I want out, which I don't see that happening either. In Nylander's case, it's rumored that he wants over $10 million a season. Now, Carolina also was known for not signing bad contracts and giving players exactly what they feel they're worth. I don't know that the Hurricanes would pay William Nylander $10 million. So that is why I have a little bit of skepticism on this trade from the get-go. Maybe he has to take a little bit less than that. Who knows? But at the end of the day, William Nylander, I don't think at least, can get $10 million from the Leafs, even though that's reportedly what he wants. Now, I seen an article, it was actually part of a podcast with the Hockey News with Mike Stevens and Rachel Dory talking about this scenario, and they were talking about what it would take if, because they started talking about Brett Pesce and how he's maybe on, where he's not signed to, maybe he's going to end up being moved. Where could he go? Obviously, he's a defensive style defenseman, second pair guy, good value. They should get a good return. They mentioned Marty Necas. It was, even though his name has been out there a little bit, the rumor mill too. And then they linked him back to Toronto and the fact that the Leafs really can't pay William Nylander $10 million. And if he doesn't budge on his asking price and come down closer to like 9 or under, that maybe they'd see a deal there. I mean, Pesce's making $4 million. Necas is making $3 million. So there's $7 million. If Nylander wants 10, it doesn't exactly drive perfectly salary capitalized. And there might have to be some other pieces involved here, but that could be a really solid framework for a trade. Now, Nylander's been linked to the Hurricanes for a long time, and he dating back to his last contract that's expiring now. Even when he was going through all those, long drawn-out negotiations, then his name was up in a rumor mill for the first couple months of the season, even in the summer before that, because he wasn't signed. And it drug on so long that the Hurricanes were a team that had a lot of interest in that player, and I can imagine they still do. They need another star player who can score big goals. And Nylander, you can say what you want about him, he's been a good playoff performer for Toronto when it's mattered most. And he certainly performed, I think, better than some of the other top league players in crunch time in the most important games. So as far as Carolina having a lot of deep playoff runs, well, I think he could help them getting over that hump. I mean, he always has players on that team he knows. Longtime goalie Freddie Anderson is there. Michael Bunting just signed there. Lots of familiarity. I think he could be a great fit. Obviously, lots of European players on that team as well. Nylander for some kind of combination of Necas and Pesce would at least be a better team. I mean, Marty Necas is still a young enough player on the rise. He could absolutely play a top 6 role. You get Pesce, who is a really good defensive style defenseman who could play top 4 minutes for the Leafs. And we know Tree Living is likely still looking to kind of rebuild that blue line a little bit. I see good value there for Toronto. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be other pieces involved, but those are 2 roster players that will be making just over $7 million. So from Carolina's standpoint, the other way they could make some space here if they needed to is they're currently carrying 3 goaltenders on their roster after re-signing Freddie Anderson and Antti Ranta. So they still have Pyotr Kochetkov, and Kochetkov is making $2 million, but is still waivers exempt. He could go down to the minors as well, and they could get some cap relief on his contract to free up even more. So I think from a cap perspective, the Hurricanes absolutely could do it if they really wanted to, and obviously Toronto could too, because they wouldn't necessarily have to take back $10 million. They could take back, say, $7 million, give themselves a solid top 4D and another top 9, top 6 forward. That's pretty solid, and at times can be over 20 goals scored too. So to me, I really like the intriguing piece here. I really think that makes a lot of sense if it comes to that. Now, of course, we're not saying Nylander's going to be traded for certain because we don't know. But at the end of the day, this is a huge gap in salary negotiations. I don't think the Leafs can wait forever to make a move. And, it wouldn't be shocking if they did pull the trigger sometime before the season started. Now, another intriguing idea as well, if that didn't work out, as I've seen that discussed just briefly, is would they call San Jose with Erik Karlsson? Now, San Jose might be willing to pay Nylander what he's looking for, and they wouldn't have to retain as much money. I mean, well, Toronto's not going to want to be able to pay Karlsson over 11, but they retain some money and knock him down to $7.5 million. They have been linked to Karlsson as well. They're one of the teams in the mix, along with Carolina, Pittsburgh, and a couple other teams that have been talking to San Jose about Karlsson. Now, that would be interesting too. I mean, obviously Erik Karlsson still has a home in Ottawa, spends time there in the summer. His wife's and her family is from there, so clearly it's a scenario that would be close to home for him. I don't know how he would personally feel about it because he has full control over where he goes, but that's another interesting one as well if it gets to that. But I think Carolina offers them a better package just to be a little bit more well-balanced and well-suited. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. If William Nylander is traded, is the Carolina Hurricanes a good landing spot? And is the framework package starting point of a Pesce and Aegis and maybe something else going back the other way? Is that a good starting point that the Leafs could actually, make themselves a better balanced team and be better in the long run by moving on a high-profile player? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.